Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Board on a Thursday. We are bringing you our wide receiver rankings and coverage today. Sorry it's taking so long to get back, but just had some things come up and finally ready to dive into wide receivers today. So joining me as always is Justin. Justin, what's up?
Hey, what's up everyone? Excited to talk about receivers today, man. Favorite position in fantasy?
Yeah, you kind of started the wide receiver first round pick in our league.
I'm the first guy to start it, and I went wide receiver one league. I got laughed at. That was the year Randy Moss did Randy Moss's thing when he got to New England. So it hasn't worked out lately though.
No.
So wide receiver is the most fun position to draft in my opinion.
Yeah, because I feel like the good receivers are always going to be at the top, where running backs are kind of more fluid. You know, like the top 10 never looks the same year in, year out for running backs. So let's go ahead and get started into our wide receiver rankings. So 1 through 10 for me is as follows: Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, Jordy Nelson, A.J. Green, Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, T.Y. Hilton, Dez Bryant, and at 10 I got Doug Baldwin. So just off the top, is there anybody that you have maybe lower than I have them or higher than I have them?
I have a different, just based on my personal list of a guy I think is going to actually be the number one receiver by year's end, it's Odell Beckham Jr. this year. Just because I finally think he's got some serious help at the wide receiver position to take some pressure off of him. But again, that's not something that I necessarily disagree with. That's just my own personal preference. And then, I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, I'm sure, because I'm sure me and you have the same thoughts on this. But Dez Bryant at 9. I have a feeling you have him at 9, but I also have a feeling that you're a little lower on him than years past. So I'm kind of low on Dez this year as well.
Yeah, I put him at 9.
I think it's too high, personally, just because, I know why you have him on there, probably because of the talent level. I'm sure you'll get into that, but that kind of stood out to me as at 9. I have Dez me personally, I have him in the middle teens to high teens going into the season.
I like Dez if he can stay healthy. Again, this is where you get into guys like Dez Bryant. Later we'll talk about Keenan Allen, guys like that it's hard to project what they're going to do over 16 games because they just never seem to play 16 games. If I had the choice of picking Dez Bryant 9th receiver-wise, I don't know. I wouldn't be too confident in the pick. I might wait to get a wide receiver later just because Dez is always hit or miss. Last year he had a lot of games where he had 3 or 4 games where he had 1 reception last year. So as far as the other top guys on this list, he just doesn't get the targets and he doesn't get the receptions normally. He has to depend on those big plays. And he's
a touchdown machine. He's so good in the red zone. He's so good at he had a ton of touchdowns last year when he played. But like you said, you got to worry about injuries, and you also have to worry about there was a bunch of games, 2 or 3 in particular, especially down the stretch. Where he performed well, but if you had him early in the season, he put you in such a hole early in the season because of injuries, and even before he got injured, he wasn't playing great. That kind of hurts you a lot. So, even if you did have him go off for you towards the end of the season, he had 2 big games during playoff weeks, a lot of people were already out of the hunt by then that had Dez as maybe their number one receiver. So, I don't know. I think that also with Dak, I think that they're still going to be very conservative on offense. I think they're going to let him kind of throw the ball around a little bit more this year than they did last year. But he showed you last year that he really likes his underneath receivers. He really likes to go to the tight end. He really likes going to Cole Beasley. I'm not really sold on Dak downfield yet. Maybe that'll change, but if he's able to do that, the Dez becomes top 10. But until I see that, it's hard for me to put him up there.
Yeah, we say that he scores a lot. Last year he had, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. So that's good, but he's one of those guys that, to me, he'll have a 20-point fantasy day or he'll have a 4-point fantasy day. And just the inconsistency with him a lot of times just drives me crazy. And, you know,
it's mainly the injuries, too. Wouldn't you agree that, like, you know, if you look at, he has a couple down games, but if you look at his stats from last year, the stuff where he really hurts you was even when he's playing through injury, he's really ineffective. So, again, he always had, and the frustrating thing about him is he has those lingering injuries that are like, you know, maybe it's a shoulder, maybe it's a thumb, maybe it's a knee, and it's ones that don't keep him out for like a huge extended period of time, even though he missed like 4 or 5 games last year. But it's one of those injuries that we talked about, with, you know, that we mentioned with Gronk and stuff. Is like it's just always something. It seems like, you know what I mean?
I would rather have a guy that's gonna get injured and be out 3 weeks, and then I know when he comes back he's 100%, than a guy that plays 15 games, but 4 of those he's 70 or 60%. And so with Des Bryant, I feel like of the top 10, he brings the most risk to me personally, and at that range, I'm kind of staying away from risk. But if he was to fall to me, you know, kind of like where you had him in the late teens or something like that, wide receiver wise, then I'd be totally fine spending that for Dez. But another guy I want to talk about that's kind of got some people worried is T.Y. Hilton. The news came out that Andrew Luck it's possible that he could be out the first 6 weeks of the season if they put him on the PUP list. So how far down, if Andrew Luck is out, how far down do you think that would bring T.Y. Hilton?
Outside of the top 25. I mean, honestly, I just like literally. I mean, it's that drastic. If Andrew Luck's not playing, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know who the backup is. Who's the backup for the Colts?
Tolzien.
Yeah, well, there you go. No disrespect to Tolzien, but he's not Andrew Luck, you know. And Andrew Luck's another guy, man, who great player, but like he's going through a ton of injuries as well. So again, we talk about a guy who never gets injured, and T.Y. Hilton just about, and then he's going to be affected by his quarterback though. So again, I put him outside my top 20, top 25. I mean, I hate to. You know, T.Y. Hilton's a really good player. He can get you the huge plays, but I think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton normally he'll have some. He seems to always be on the injury report, but he always seems to go out and play, and he doesn't seem to be hindered too much by those lingering injuries, as where Dez is just kind of completely shut down. So let's move on to.
And real quickly, he had an incredible year last year, and I just want to mention one guy before we move on because it's like. Probably my guy that I'm really targeting is Mike Evans for Tampa Bay. I think Mike Evans is a dude who can just carry your team in this season. You know, I mean, you look at his stats from last year. I mean, you're talking about consistency. I mean, this dude every week gave you a good game, and he had, you know, when you're talking about fantasy MVPs, you look at like guys who have monster games who win you a week, and then you also talk about guys who just consistently get you points. And his lowest point total from last year was 8.2 points in standard scoring. So that's incredible. I mean, I think Mike Evans is a dude that we really need to be looking out for this year, who could even take his game to the next level. He has all the physical tools to do so.
Yeah, I don't trust Jameis Winston as much as I trust some of these other guys. I even trust AJ Green more than him, just because Andy Dalton, he's not going to light the world on fire. But he's also not going to have, 20 interceptions in a season. And Jameis Winston seems to have those games where he'll, when it starts going bad, it goes real bad. And, I like all these guys, in the top 7, I'm real confident in. But then once you get past those guys, I feel like it kind of starts, just T.Y. Hilton, his quarterback situation, and then, of course, we talked about Dez. I like Doug Baldwin a lot, too. I think he's really consistent. So,
well, I tell you what you need to also, people that are looking at A.J. Green and say, well, he missed like all of the second half of the season. There's a difference between guys like Des Bryant, who's consistently injured throughout his whole career, and a guy like A.J. Green. I believe before last year, he had only missed like 9 games or something in his entire career over the past like 5 seasons. So those don't worry me near as much as guys who consistently have the nagging injuries, kind of like a Big Ben Roethlisberger, like guys who consistently miss like 4 to 5 to 6 weeks a season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I trust AJ Green way more than Des Bryant. I just
of course, yeah.
mainly the injury history, but I just think his volume, the amount of volume he gets, is more consistent than what Dez gets.
And he's only 29. It seems like he's been in the league for 20 years, but he's only 29. I mean, he's like 29 entering this season. So I'm intrigued to see him this year. I'm kind of down on the Bengals this year, but A.J. Green's still a guy who commands that, top 5 receiver ranking.
So let's move on. 11 through 20. At 11, I've got Demaryius Thomas, Michael Crabtree, Larry Fitzgerald, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Golden Tate, Sammy Watkins at 17, DeAndre Hopkins, Terrell Pryor, and Allen Robinson. So of those guys, somebody I want to talk about that I have a lot higher than other people is Michael Crabtree. A lot of people have Amari Cooper ahead of him. I just think Michael Crabtree's more consistent. At the end of last season, if you had Amari Cooper and you were counting on him, he probably either kept you out of the playoffs or, kept you from winning your league. So Michael Crabtree gets more red zone targets, almost double the number that Amari Cooper got last year. He scored more touchdowns. He's outscored Amari Cooper every year, fantasy-wise. So I just think you can get Crabtree a little bit later, and the amount of production he's going to give you is almost equal to what Cooper will give you, a few picks earlier.
Yeah, well, I'm all in on Amari Cooper this year. I'm all in on, if you've been listening to all of our rankings, you know how big I am on Derek Carr this year, and you know how big I am on the Raiders. So I'm going to make a bold prediction, man. I really think Amari Cooper is going to finish in the top 6 at the end of the season for receivers. The only thing that's keeping him from doing so is, he kind of tailed off towards the end of the season last year. He had some games where he really kind of, and again, I'm talking about the fantasy season. So like weeks 13 through like 15. But if you look at he's one of those guys that we talked about. Especially if you're a PPR, he really does, he had a great first half of the season. I think that he's still young. He's only turning 23, so I think he's still got to get his, you would think that a young guy would be able to sustain a full NFL season. I still think he's got to get that under control a little bit because he really kind of tailed off a little bit toward, there in the second half of the year. But if he gets in the end zone more, that's my major concern. And you can't really bank on touchdowns, but touchdowns is what gets you into the top 5, top 6. I think Amari Cooper will do that this year, and so I have him really high. I have him in my top 10. I have him like 8 or 9.
Yeah, we've talked about Amari Cooper a lot, and we just disagree a little bit. I still think he's a top wide receiver. He's right there on the verge of wide receiver 1. There's just some guys, and we've talked about this before. There's just some guys that you like more than other guys, and when the stats kind of back it up, it just reinforces what you kind of already knew. But I'd be okay taking either one of those guys. Again, I just think that you're going to be able to get Crabtree a little bit later, and the production is going to be pretty equal. Another guy that I'd like to talk about is, a lot of Larry Fitzgerald at 13 for a lot of people is way too high. But last year, Carson Palmer had probably the worst season of his career, and Larry Fitzgerald still finished 11th, I believe, in standard scoring, and then in PPR, I think he was around the same thing. But, he had 107 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, and that's when your quarterback has a terrible year. So if Carson Palmer can just get a little bit back to what he was a couple years ago, then I would have to assume that those numbers are going to stay close to the same or if not improve. So for me personally, I always like consistency, so that's why I would have no problem taking Larry Fitzgerald ahead of guys like Golden Tate, Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, just because he's proven year in and year out that he can get it done.
Yeah, we talked about guys kind of, tailing off toward the end of the season. In terms of fantasy points, he was hit or miss those last 3 or 4 weeks. He had some big games, had some, not so good games. But the thing that I do like about Fitzgerald is he is consistent. He always starts the season off super strong, which I've noticed. And I think that his age, that is a concern, just because I think the Cardinals, the Cardinals just seem like that team that could be on the verge of, like, kind of blowing it up. You know what I mean? Like, they seem like a lot of their key guys. I know their running back situation's great, but Carson, it all depends on Carson. Like you said, if Carson has a better season, then you would assume that Larry Fitzgerald would have a better season as well. But it really comes down to Carson Palmer's play. I mean, if Carson Palmer plays a lot better this year, I could see the numbers kind of being the same. I just don't think Larry Fitzgerald has a ton of upside from this position. So I think the ranking is good. But when you're kind of looking at 10 through 20, if you're looking for upside, I would probably look elsewhere. But if you're looking for the consistent points, especially in a PPR league, then yeah, Fitzgerald's, just in terms of pure football, he's one of the best receivers in the game, obviously. So.
And we just, different people like to draft their team based on different things. Me personally, I'm always going to prefer the guy that I can count on, that I can trust. Over
that doesn't win you championships.
How does that not win you championships? A guy getting you 2 points because, he just, like a Sammy Watkins, because he didn't get that 60-yard touchdown, that's guys that lose you weeks. And to me personally, I would much rather have a guy I trust than a guy like, he's got a high ceiling, or he's got a lot of upside. Upside doesn't mean anything if they're not performing. And I just feel like some of these guys.
It's that guy when he does perform, though. It's championship. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the key. Is like finding those guys.
Okay, so who from 11 to 20 is that guy that you think has just so much upside that you just can't pass up on him?
Amari Cooper.
Oh my God.
100%. And I'm telling you, if people aren't listening to me at this point about the Raiders, then come week, 12, 13, I'll say I told you so, because Amari Cooper has got all the upside in the world. And if you're kind of taking guys around this area, I do like to take a little bit of upside, because you're not missing a whole lot in terms of production, even if you do go for the younger guy, the more promising player.
See, I just don't think guys that have another really good option at receiver next to them, I don't think their ceiling is as high as people want to think. Like, I don't think Amari Cooper, his growth is as big as, say, a guy like, Sammy Watkins, where he's really the only option. Allen Robinson, who is pretty much the only receiving option. I mean, they got Hearns, but he's not on the same level as Robinson. So, again, these are just discussions you're going to have on draft day about who do you trust, how do you want to build your team. But if you build a team of strictly guys based on upside, then I think more times than not you're gonna be on the losing end of your week.
Receiver is a position, though, you can take some risks on because you can get value late in the draft.
I agree. I agree with that.
So, again, I like Fitzgerald. I just meant that if you have an option between an Amari Cooper and a Fitzgerald, because they're kind of in the same grouping of players, I think Cooper's going to go ahead of Fitzgerald a bunch, maybe by like even a round. But I'm just saying, like, that's stuff that you have to weigh out.
So let's move on to 21 through 30. We've got Keenan Allen at 21, followed by Devontae Adams, Brandon Marshall, Jarvis Landry, Alshon Jeffrey, Emmanuel Sanders, Julian Edelman, Tyreek Hill, Martavis Bryant, and John Brown at 30. So the first thing I want to talk about is, the Dolphins, they just signed Jay Cutler, and everyone thinks that, kind of wondering how this plays into Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker. To me, I don't think it helps them, and I don't think it really hurts them. I think it really just kind of keeps them in the same place that they're already at. I don't think Cutler is an upgrade from Tannehill. If it was me personally, I would have just stuck with Matt Moore. I kind of think Matt Moore played pretty well last year when he came in, but I don't see Jay Cutler making Jarvis Landry a top 10 receiver or anything.
Well, yeah, and we have to mention pretty breaking news is Jarvis Landry is being investigated right now for battery. So there's an ongoing investigation reporting. Adam Gay, the coach, kind of came out and said that today. I mean, this is literally just like across the wire.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to give you that info real quick.
His girlfriend came out and said that he didn't do anything. So I don't know.
Just stuff you got to put a little note and just be aware of. But in terms of just football, I mean, I think that, look, I like, if we're just talking about on the football field, I like Jarvis Landry's game a lot. Not only from just a football perspective, but from a fantasy football perspective, because my favorite thing about receivers is guys who can get catches and who can get points in a variety of different ways. And I think Jarvis Landry's a guy that can line up anywhere on the field, and the Dolphins make it a point to try to get him the ball. And, he's not only good in standard, but he's really good in PPR too, just because they find ways to get him the ball with screens, with different things. So I like guys like that the team, you can tell, is like, hey, if they're trying to cover because some teams, if they cover your best receiver, it's like, okay, we're going to go elsewhere and we'll just line him up there the whole day. With Jarvis Landry, they're going to make sure that he gets involved in the game plan a lot. So I really like Jarvis Landry this year. I've liked him, last year as well and the year before, but I really think he's due for like another consistent, solid season. And I could even see if everything stays good off the field. We don't know about these reports yet, but if he doesn't miss any games, I could definitely see him improve this ranking.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him top 20, maybe top 15, but I just don't think he doesn't get in the end zone enough to be a top 5, top 10 guy, in my opinion.
Top 10, but 20, I just said higher, so like, 15 on a ranking of, what do you have him ranked again?
24.
So again, if you get top 15 receiver value out of a 24 rated, receiver, I mean, that's big time. That's big time value. So, that's all I meant. It's like having him, he could definitely creep into that top 20, maybe even that top 15, depending on, a bunch of different things, just like with anybody. But yeah, touchdowns is definitely something with all these guys that'll get you the top 5, top 10. So, and that's the tough thing. Touchdowns are tough to gauge, So I do like a guy who gets his points without necessarily having to get into the end zone.
I really like him in daily. When I do daily fantasy, I like getting Jarvis Landry just because the same reason I like Julian Edelman is because that he's going to get you a certain amount of points, and then if he gets in the end zone, it's just added bonus.
Well, just point this out if you don't mind real quick. Like just looking at his stats from last year, from weeks 1 through 7, he had 1 touchdown. But just really quickly, his points went 12.9, 21.5, 26.6, 13.1, 6, 16.1, 14.8. So again, that 1 touchdown game was the 26-point game. But all those other games, he's getting you double digits other than 1 game. So that's like awesome. If you can have a guy who doesn't have to get in the end zone, get you that type of production, when he does get in the end zone, he gets you those 25-point monster games. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Another guy that's really high on a lot of people's list, and I see him on every sleeper thing out there, is Martavis Bryant. And I'm not high on Martavis Bryant at all. First of all, he hasn't even been reinstated yet. So who knows when that's going to happen. I mean, there's no telling when he could be reinstated. And I just don't like guys that have yet to prove anything on the field, and they just keep getting this hype year in and year out of, they got a good quarterback, so it's like, oh, man, this is the guy that could blow up. Well, we've been saying that for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not big on Martavis Bryant just because I don't know if he's going to stay on the field. I mean, if this dude is on the field, then yeah, he's a very interesting player because he's got incredible size and speed. He plays with one of the best offenses in the league, so of course they're going to like him. But again, it's just like people that always drafted Josh Gordon. That's fun for a few weeks, and then something happens. So again, it's a guy that I would definitely have on my list of like, okay, if I can get him at a good price, then yeah, that could be a game changer if he stays on the field this season or if he gets reinstated, whatever. But if he doesn't, man, that's a guy that you keep on your roster that you're just hoping, gets back on the field, that you're hoping, doesn't do anything wrong, and who you can't really drop because the whole reason you drafted him is for that potential. So, I'm staying away from it. I mean, unless I get him, like, super deep in the draft, like 2 or 3 rounds lower than what you have him ranked, then, yeah, I'm not going to take a chance.
Another guy I like is John Brown for Arizona. He had a terrible year last year. I think, a lot of that was due to the quarterback. But without Michael Floyd there this year, he steps into that number 2 role. And I think him and Larry Fitzgerald, I think their production could be pretty close at the end of the season. And you're going to get John Brown way later in the draft. So, I would be happy if I got Fitzgerald, but where I'm going to get John Brown, that's a better value to me going forward. And I would be, he's a guy that I'm marking on all my draft boards that I want to target because I feel like he could have a top 10 year, top 15 year, and be that guy that puts you over the top.
My goodness, what? Top 10?
Yeah, why not?
John Brown?
Who would have thought last year that Devontae Adams would be top 10? Nobody thought Devontae Adams would have been top 10.
But you're ripping my Amari Cooper, and you're putting John Brown in potential top 10 territory? Come on, man.
Yeah. John Brown, let me look at it real quick. Well, I can't find him because he's so far down on last year's scoring list. But
it's. I mean, I think you got to just, let's keep this. Let's not edit this out. But I hope people are listening because this is one of those ones that you got to answer for later in the season if he doesn't pan out. Just like I'll have to answer for my prediction that Derek Carr will be MVP this season.
Yeah, I would say that John Brown one's a lot closer than
Hit us up on Twitter, though. Let us know after you listen to this episode. What's a crazier prediction? John Brown potentially being in the top 10 territory or Derek Carr as MVP?
All right. So moving on. 31 through 40. At 31, I got Willie Snead, followed by Pierre Garçon, Jeremy Maclin, Mike Wallace, Rashard Matthews, Stephon Diggs, Kelvin Benjamin, Jamison Crowder, Dante Moncrief, and Cameron Meredith. Willie Snead's another guy just like John Brown. I think the guy ahead, the number one receiver is going to get a majority of the work, but Willie Snead is a great value late in your draft. His numbers aren't going to be drastically behind Michael Thomas's this year, and I just think, again, the value that there's so many receivers that you can get late. I would totally be okay with, building out your running backs, maybe even take a quarterback, and then getting your wide receivers starting round 4 or 5, because there's just so many guys late that you can get that I think are going to make a difference this year.
Yeah, I think Willie Snead is a guy who could break your heart, though. I don't. Again, if you get him in this position, he won't. But
yeah, he's not going to break your heart if you're taking him 30.
He'll break your heart if you put him he's a guy that week to week. It's scary, man. It's scary being a Willie Snead owner because he really needs those big plays to give you production. He had a really good season last year, but I think that he has to. Look, I don't like Willie Snead this year, okay? I'll just come out and say I'm not a big fan of Willie Snead this year.
I'm just telling you, they lost Brandon Cooks, and
those Drew Brees will find a bunch of different people to go to. A bunch of different people. I just think that there's guys in this, there's one guy in particular in this ranking that I would really be targeting, other than Willie Snead. No disrespect to Willie, but,
No disrespect after you pretty much called him a bum.
I didn't call him a bum. I said he's not.
You hinted around it.
He relies too much on big plays, and I don't like those type of players on my team. I like upside, but I don't like boomer bust options.
See, I don't think he's going to be a boomer bust this year. I think without Brandon Cooks taking all the targets he took last year, I think those are going to get divvied out, and Willie Snead's going to get a good chunk of those, and you're going to see his production go up.
See, I have to say this, though. A lot of people think that when the best receiver on a team leaves, that, gosh, he's going to get the most targets. Well, guess what, man? There's a reason he's a wide receiver number 3, okay? Because he doesn't have the best corners on him. Let's see how Willie Snead does when he has the best corners in the game on him. When he doesn't have Brandon Cooks there to take pressure off of him, it is a different animal. It's a different ballgame.
Willie Snead will be this year's Devontae Adams.
My
Mark it down.
This show's gone off the rails completely. Willie Snead.
Yeah, hey, please get into your Jamison Crowder discussion, because I know you can't wait to talk about Jamison Crowder.
Thank you for bringing it up. Jamison Crowder is an absolute steal if you get him based on Chris's rankings. No disrespect, Chris, but Jamison Crowder being this low in your rankings is criminal. This dude is going to... Now, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, but he's going to get more targets this year because Deshaun Jackson's gone. All right? So, yeah, I get it. I contradicted myself a little bit here. But the thing I like about Jamison Crowder is he's another guy that doesn't need to get in the end zone to have great games. He's a guy who has had some good games without having to get in the end zone. He's had a couple of double-digit point games without end zone. The thing that worries me, once again, same with any undersized receiver, it's always risky because you're not sure if he's going to get in the end zone. I think he had 8 touchdowns last year, maybe. I could be wrong on that, but that's going to be hard to duplicate. But if he gets more targets, gets more catches, gets more yards, I think he'll make up for that in the long run throughout the course of the season.
I don't think his targets are going to go up as much as you think.
Because they're going to go way up this year.
Because Terrell Pryor is going to get a majority of those. He's going to be the number one receiver.
But he doesn't have that rapport.
Man, Terrell Pryor was putting up huge weeks with freaking Cleveland's offense last year. So don't tell me he can't do the same with Kirk Cousins.
He doesn't have the rapport.
Man, that is so overrated.
Rapport is everything in football from what I've read.
Then I guess Julian Edelman should be number one then.
You want to talk about Julian Edelman too?
Not really.
I'll just say this. I like Julian Edelman.
Yeah, I mean, for where you're going to get him this year, I think he's a good value, but...
Jamison Crowder should be in the top 27.
Okay. I'm not gonna put Jamison Crowder ahead of guys like Emmanuel Sanders, Alshon Jeffrey, Julian Edelman. I have him at 27. I'm not gonna put him ahead of those guys. Now I think he's gonna have a good year, but again, he's a guy that you can get later on that you can fill out your team with. But if I had to go in and week out, depending on Jamison Crowder as a starter, I probably wouldn't be too excited for my team.
Oh, I'd love my team if I had Jamison Crowder as my flex receiver.
And once again, you'd miss the playoffs.
Let's move on.
So let's go to our sleepers and busts. So for me, I've already hit on a couple of these guys. For me, the sleepers are John Brown, Willie Snead, and Jeremy Maclin. Jeremy Maclin's a guy. He's going to Baltimore. They've had a ton of injuries already. It seems like every tight end they put out there is getting hurt. I just think he's a good, safe pick that you can get later on, a guy that you can sit on your bench, that if a guy goes down, you have a guy that you can trust to put in for some weeks or bye weeks, and I think he's going to overperform where he's getting drafted. My busts, I've got Keenan Allen, Kelvin Benjamin, and Martavis Bryant. Again, we've been over Martavis Bryant. I'm just not big on Kelvin Benjamin. I think Cam Newton's too inconsistent, and majority of the time he likes to go to Greg Olsen in the red zone, and I just think they added some weapons that are going to take away some of those targets for Benjamin, so I'm low on him this year.
Yeah, I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go deep sleep early. I'm only going to talk about one sleeper because, I've kind of already hit on guys who I think should be ranked a little higher, but my deep sleeper this year is Corey Davis, the rookie out of Tennessee. I think Mariota's going to have a really strong season, and I think that he is going to finally have a legit, sized number one receiver, like a guy who's going to be just a game-changing playmaker type of player. I think there's a reason they got him where they did in the draft, to give Mariota that weapon that he needs. And so I like Corey Davis a lot. I think on ESPN's rankings, he's 47th. I see on a lot of other people's rankings, he's right around 50. So I think this is a guy who could actually break the top 30 by season end if he gets accustomed to the NFL speed of the game quick enough. I could definitely see that. My bust this year is Dez Bryant. I wouldn't even say he's a bust really, but just based on your rankings. If I was ranking him 9th, I would say based on your rankings he'd be a bust for me. But even with him being 15th on some people's board, I think he'll have an outside the top 20 season. I just don't, that's kind of my bust for this season.
Going back to Corey Davis, the only thing I'm worried about with Corey Davis is they've got a lot of mouths to feed in Tennessee. They brought in Eric Decker. Rashard Matthews is still there, who had a good year last year. They've got Delaney Walker. So there's just a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. And, he's a guy, again, you're not looking for him to start week in and week out. But if you get him later, and just sit him on your bench and see what happens, he's a guy that you could release and not feel like it's crushing your team. But he could pan out and be, a top talent. So
I'm going to go one more deep sleep, and I don't even want to give this away because people in our league are going to listen to this and they're going to target him now. But I'm going to go one more deep sleeper, if I may.
Go ahead.
Kenny Galladay from Detroit. All right. Everything I'm hearing is that this dude is beasting in camp. He's going to be like their third receiver, taking over for Anquan Bolden. He was a third-round pick. He's 6'4", 213. He's got all the size. I could really see this guy breaking out this season. Again, in terms of where he's going to be. I mean, this guy might go undrafted, like on a lot of people, or late. So this is a deep sleeper. This is kind of a guy you take with like the last pick or two of your draft as a waiver. But I like him this year just based on the things I'm hearing out of camp and his role in a potentially potent offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's a name to, keep on your radar. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if I'm getting him late round.
That's deep info. I mean, not a lot of people know about him, but I do because I keep up with it. I'm all about Detroit's training camps.
You probably just went on Twitter and saw a story about him and decided to throw it out there, correct?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So that's going to wrap up our wide receiver coverage. So when the season starts, we'll be having weekly shows. We'll not only be going into guys we like for that week to put in your lineups or maybe to sit, but we're also going to be going over daily fantasy. We'll be going over bargains, guys used to stay away from, good tournament plays, things like that. So make sure you check that out. Justin, thanks once again for joining us. We always have these good little debates about who we like and who we don't like as much, and so make sure you.
No problem. I'm disappointed there's no Twitter questions this week.
Yeah, we had some Twitter questions. Do you want to?
Let's answer two.
All right, so we'll go. Jeff asks, will Devontae Adams repeat his touchdown production from last year?
No.
Yeah, I agree.
Close.
No.
Not even close, Jeff.
I could see him around seven touchdowns, 7 to 8 maybe.
Five.
God almighty.
5 touchdowns.
Oh my Lord. And also, JP asks, what he says in his drafts, he sees the mock drafts, he has to choose between Deshaun Jackson, Emmanuel Sanders, and Jamison Crowder. Who out of that group would you like? For me, it'd be Emmanuel Sanders. I'm assuming for you it'd be Crowder.
110% Jamison Crowder all day long.
So
out of those 3 players, yeah.
So those are our questions. Sorry, forgot to get to those. We'll be doing our tight end show here this week. We'll be releasing that, and after that, we'll be getting into more specific strategies and things like that. Who to target when, what are good values and stuff like that before the season starts. So make sure you check that out. You can follow me at Board Sports, BORED Sports on Twitter and on the webpage boardonthursday.com. Justin, thanks once again, man, for joining us, and hope to do it next time on the tight ends.
No problem. Yeah, I'll be there for the tight ends for sure.
All right, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.